In this video, I'll be talking about 5 things I wish I knew when I first started spearfishing, so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Hey guys, for those of you new here, my name's Ethan, and I'd say I've been properly spearfishing now for almost 2 years, and I feel like I have enough knowledge now to make this video. And I wish someone would have told me these 5 things when I first started spearfishing, as I made so many mistakes, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing as I did learn and evolve from them all. However, a lot of them could have been easily prevented. So hopefully this video helps you avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made. So let's get into it. So coming in at number 1, get the right gear, which in my opinion is one of the most important. For example, you're not going to try and play golf using a tennis racket or do jiu-jitsu wearing jeans. I mean, it's possible, but just not ideal. So if you've tried spearfishing a few times and know that's something you want to pursue and get into more seriously, I highly recommend investing in the proper gear from the start. And I'm going to say this up front, but spearfishing can and often does get quite expensive, and you might not see the fruit at the start. However, I guarantee if you persist and stick with it, there's no doubt it will eventually pay off and you'll be eating quality seafood whenever you want. But by getting the right gear, it's going to make spearfishing so much easier and more enjoyable. And I understand that money might be an issue for some people, but trust me, by getting the right gear from the start, it's going to save a lot of time, effort, and even money in the long run. As for me, I was wearing a crappy wetsuit for almost 2 years, as I refused to upgrade to a proper spearfishing one just because I thought it was too expensive. And now, fast forward 2 years later, and I've spent thousands of dollars on multiple spearfishing wetsuits. But when I first started, I was heap stingy and actually went through 3 secondhand surf and scuba diving wetsuits before finally upgrading. But far out, looking back, I wish I did it from the start. It was seriously ridiculous though. I used to have to put on full body skins underneath my wetsuit just to try and keep warm and stop the chafing. So if you plan on being in the water for a few hours, I highly recommend investing in a proper open cell spearfishing wetsuit. So another piece of gear you do not want to stinge out on is a proper spearfishing mask. I can't stress enough, get a good mask that fits your face. And if you've got a dive store nearby, pop over and try on all the masks and buy the mask that fits your face the best. You will not regret it. But what you will regret is being in the water and having a leaking mask, wishing you spent that extra $20 and got the mask that fit your face best. Next up, it's going to be helpful to get yourself a pair of freediving fins. Not scuba, not snorkeling, but freediving. And if you want to save money, get a pair which has removable blades. So when you finally decide to upgrade your blades, you can keep your foot pockets and just change your blades. And lastly, a very useful bit of equipment to get is a float, which I used to only think was necessary if you're going to shoot big fish. However, that is definitely not the case. Having a float is going to help make you visible in the water to boats and also your mates. And if you're tired, you can rest in it, and it's also a place where you can store your fish in the water. I was stupid when I first started and didn't have a float, which meant that every time I shot a fish, I had to swim and walk all the way back to shore to put my fish in the esky, which wasted so much time that I could have spent diving instead. So looking back, obviously I wish I'd gotten the right gear from the start. However, it's all part of the process and I've learned from it, which is why I'm making this video. So hopefully you guys don't make the same mistake that I made. Next up, number 2, how to read the weather, as who the heck wants to go out diving in dirty and rough conditions? But I can't even recall the number of times I went out diving when I first started and the conditions were just rubbish, all because I didn't know how to read the weather. I legit just went when the temperature was warm and it wasn't raining. But now when it comes to reading the weather, there are 3 main things I look at. What are they, Ethan? Well, I was hoping you would ask. The first is the swell, which is basically how big the waves are. And over time, you learn to understand that different dive locations require different swells to be diveable. So learning how to read the swell is so important. The second is the wind, which is the wind. And obviously you don't want to be diving if it's super windy, as it's just going to make the swell even bigger. However, there's something called offshore and onshore winds. And for spearfishing, typically you want offshore winds, which means that the wind is blowing from the land, off the land, to the shore. Off the shore. Offshore winds. Okay. Which means that it's going to help flatten the swell. Lastly, the tides. It's not as important, but if there is a big tide change, it can be quite dangerous, as depending on where you're diving, the current can get very strong and can pull you out to sea. So when reading the weather, it's good to be aware of these factors. The 3 apps I use are Willy Weather, Seabreeze, and Windy. Disclaimer, they are not always accurate. Coming in at number 3, take your time. When I first started spearfishing, I was so excited and would always be rushing to get in the water and was constantly forgetting gear. And in the end, I'd have to double back, which would waste even more time. Or on the super rare occasion where I didn't forget anything, I would quickly suit up and jump straight in the water and just gun it to the reef. And by the time I got out there, I would be completely out of breath and would barely be able to hold my breath for more than 10 seconds without feeling like I'm about to pass out. Spearfishing is the same as any other sport. For example, if you're going to play a basketball game, you're not going to just rock up right before the game and start playing at 100% effort. You're going to get there early and ahead of time and do anything you need to do in order to prepare yourself. And that's the same for spearfishing. It's important to take your time and not rush. As if you're rushing, you're just going to end up hindering your ability to dive to your best ability. As when you're rushing, you're not going to be able to relax and feel comfortable in the water, which I think is one of the most important things about spearfishing, just being comfortable. Another thing I try and do before diving is stretching out my legs and hydrating myself well. There's no doubt when you're first starting off, you're going to be cramping a lot. And I remember when I first started out, I used to cramp up every dive to the stage where it was actually dangerous.
I'm gonna cramp!
So try and stretch out your legs before you jump in the water, especially if you plan on diving for extended periods of time. Because like I said before, spearfishing is like any other sport. You're going to be exerting yourself, so make sure you look after your body. Next up, number 4, scouting ground. I've had so many people come up to me and think that spearfishing is simply just going to any beach, swimming out in the water, seeing and shooting fish.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
That is no way, in any way, shape or form, how spearfishing works. However, I do wish it was that easy. When my mates and I first started diving, we used to smash the same reef over and over and over again, simply just because we didn't know how to find new spots, which is probably one of the worst things you can do, as it puts a lot of pressure on the fish life in the area. However, now, I try and regularly dive different areas in order to try and minimize the risk of overfishing one area. Which leads me on to my next point. I wish when I first started spearfishing, someone would have told me Google Maps is going to be your new best friend. By looking at Google Maps, it will show you where a lot of the reefs are located, which is typically where the fish like to hang out. Even if you look on Google Maps now, you'd be able to see where the reefs are along your coastline, and it's literally that easy to find new dive spots. However, just make sure you're aware of your state's laws and regulations about the areas that you can't spearfish. But apart from that, the best thing you can do is get out there and explore new grounds, because there's nothing better than diving a new spot and being rewarded for it. And I can tell you, some of my best catches have been from spots where it's been my first time diving. Another thing I used to do when I first started spearfishing was always ask people where the good spots were, or I'd ask them where they shot a specific fish from. Personally, I don't like doing that anymore, just out of respect for the spot and for them, as obviously they've worked hard to find the spot, unless it's someone I regularly dive with. And it wasn't until I actually found a spot that was worth protecting before I understood this whole secret spot thing. And I know it might seem kind of selfish at the start, but by ultimately keeping certain spots on the down low, it's going to help prevent overfishing the spot, as well as providing you with a reliable spot you know you can go to catch yourself a feed whenever you want. So if you do find an area that is fruitful, try and keep it to yourself. Sadly, there's a bunch of videos I know I'll never be able to post because of this very reason. But in the end, finding good dive spots literally all comes down to timing the water and putting in the hard yards. So don't get discouraged if you try a new spot and it's crap, because I can't even tell you the amount of times I've dove a new spot and just been completely barren. But like Daniel Mann says, dive everywhere, guys. Last but not least, number 5. Join a spearfishing club. Joining the spearfishing club has probably been one of the best decisions I've made when it's come to spearfishing, and I wish I had joined one earlier. Being a part of the Gulf Skin Divers has significantly fast-tracked my learning, and I've learned things from other members which would have taken me years to figure out on my own. And I was also fortunate enough for a few members to take me out and show me the ropes and teach me the correct way to sustainably, ethically and safely spearfish. Being part of the club gave me a space where I could ask questions and pick a lot of the more experienced members' brains, and I can confidently say if it wasn't for the club, there is no way I would be where I am today in my diving ability. But honestly, the main thing about spearfishing, as cliche as it sounds, is just to go out there and have fun while enjoying your own unique spearfishing journey. And just remember, it's not always about who can shoot the biggest or the best fish, and I've found that when I'm not focused on this and comparing myself to others is when I can go out there and have the most fun. Anyway, if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and comment down below, as I do plan on making more of these educational videos now that I've been diving long enough. But in the meantime, I highly recommend heading over and checking out the Noobs Bureau podcast. Shrek is doing an amazing job over there, and I can't even begin to tell you how much I've learned from his podcast. Until then, dive safe, guys. Peace out.